The following podcast is offered freely through the Insight Meditation Community of Washington and by Jonathan Foust. To learn more or to make a donation to support this work, please go to www.jonathanfoust.com.
So maybe you've heard the one of this couple who drive to a casino in their $75,000 Lexus. And 3 days later, they leave that casino in a $350,000 Greyhound bus. Tonight's talk is on balance and equanimity. And I had the unexpected life experience of spending last weekend in a casino. So it informed my investigation of the topic pretty dramatically. I was at my nephew's wedding at the Sands Casino in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And so we were staying at the hotel there, and it was not a typical weekend for us. And I had sort of selected this topic of the art of balance before going, and there's something amazing about really being able to study the art, the sort of the life of imbalance, over the course of a weekend like that. But what I'd like to talk about, kind of four parts. The first is the story of the Buddha and his life experience that resulted in a very core teaching in Buddhist psychology of the middle way, this articulation of the middle way. The second part about the art of finding the balance in your life between doing and being, two very, very important elements that are constantly seeking balance. The third is about another balance that's kind of informed through yoga psychology, which is the balance of energy and awareness, of who you are as a being of energy and feeling, and who you are as a being of awareness, that which is aware. And fourth, a little bit about the goal of our practice, what's kind of considered the flower of spiritual practice, which is equanimity. And that's your capacity to find balance in the middle of anything, internally or externally, to not lose that place of balance and equipoise, if you will. So many of us are familiar with the story of the Buddha. If you haven't read about it, maybe you saw one of the movies. And I thought that the Buddha actually did look exactly like Keanu Reeves. That's what I had in my mind. But we do know the story of how the Buddha was raised in a very protected environment where he was extremely sheltered. His father was told by a famed astrologer, your son will either be a great spiritual teacher or a great leader, a political leader. And his father preferred the latter, so he tried to shelter him from all of any pain and suffering whatsoever. So every desire was fulfilled, and he spent many years very, very content. And as the story goes, and this could be a 3-week talk here, but as he ventured out from this protected shelter of the family home, he encountered 4 heavenly messengers. The first being seeing someone who was sick, seeing someone who was old, seeing someone who had died, and then seeing a renunciate, seeing someone on a spiritual path. And those heavenly messengers just rocked him. The realization that everyone born into a body is subject to sickness, old age, and death. And the suggestion or the possibility that there was a way through it became his entire life focus. So he went off to engage into the practices of that day, which you could call yoga, although it's not what you would call yoga now. Maybe you saw there's a little YouTube clip of Gandhi going to a yoga class in the United States. It's pretty hilarious. Like, this is not yoga? What are you doing? In that same way, the form of yoga that the Buddha engaged in that time were the practices of austerity, where you would push your body beyond its limits and sort of have a transcendental experience. And as he gave himself fully to that for many, many years, studying with different teachers. He had many powerful insights, but none of them, he realized, were liberating. They didn't ultimately free him, even though they were powerful and potent. So he was engaging in another form of austerity, which was denying the body food. So as the story goes, sort of the mythological story is that every day he ate 1 grain of rice less and continued his very intense and rigorous meditations and so forth. And on the final day, he collapsed, he fainted. And a young woman from another caste came by who had some milk. And when he came to, she gave him some milk, and it revived him, and he had a very powerful insight. And he was immediately chastised by his fellow practitioners, number one, for breaking his discipline, and second, for accepting food from someone from an unacceptable caste. But the Buddha's realization was, and as he went on to say, if you believe you can achieve liberation by indulging your senses, you can go down that path, but you may find it's not ultimately going to be successful. But in the same way, if you believe that you can achieve liberation by denying your senses, you may find as well that that is a fruitless path as well. So this articulation of the middle way, of not too tight, not too loose, becomes a very informative element of not only spiritual practice, but how you live your life. Noticing when it's too tight, training yourself to loosen up. Notice when it's too loose, heighten your sensitivity to notice when you need to make an adjustment. So perhaps you sense this in your life, that you're working too hard and you realize that you need to slow down, you need to take a break. Or you realize that you're unfocused, you don't have enough structure, and there's a quality of suffering in that, and a desire to find some structure, find some way to focus and feel like you're moving forward again. So this is truly a key to practice, particularly through this lens of Buddhist psychology. Determine that middle way, find that middle way for yourself. And you find that by truly paying attention. So if the practice is not to indulge in the senses or deny the senses, how do you skillfully make your way through life? Or the question is it possible to stay enlightened in a casino? I found out it isn't. So neither indulge nor deny becomes a very powerful part of the practice. And what happens is, when you begin to really pay attention and you begin to notice the natural movement of your mind, the habits that lead to unskillful results and habits that lead to more skillful results, you become more and more sensitive. And then the question becomes, how do you apply action with relaxation or non-doing? I met someone a number of years ago. He was, I think his mother was from Mexico and his father was from the United States, so he had dual citizenship. And he got into racing canoeing while he was in college and realized that he could race for the Olympics, for Mexico. And so he trained really, really hard to get on the Olympic team. This was his goal. This was like 3-year goal. It's primarily what he lived for, and all the jobs that he took were part-time that allowed him to do his training. And he was in the best shape of his life. And before the trials, the final trials on who got in the boat, he worked particularly hard that week before. And he realized in the middle of his time trial that he had overtrained. That he just didn't have the edge that he needed for the race, and he didn't make it. And spent years trying to unwind that disappointment after so much focus. There's an interesting book. It's called The Power of Full Engagement. And one of the takeaways from the book is written by an Olympic trainer and a business coach, is the recognition that you have to find that balance where you are consciously exerting and pushing your edges and building your resilience, but then you have to consciously build in time for recovery. And some of us have certain tendencies. Some of us have more of a tendency toward pushing and disciplining and setting ourselves up for burnout. Others of us have more of a tendency toward sort of going with the flow and not feeling like we're really engaging, we're really developing all of our potential. And the truth is, we really need that balance. We need the balance of engagement where we feel like we're being tested, where we feel alive, with the time of falling back and deep recovery. And so much of the suffering that I encounter in talking with people is that sense of imbalance, and particularly in the balance of introversion and extroversion. Too much extroversion, you get overstimulated and depleted. Too much introverted, you feel disconnected. You don't have an echo, and it actually can lead to almost some delusional self-talk. So adjusting that balance is part of the skill as well. I had a great conversation with a medical doctor who also had a PhD in psychoneuroimmunology, and he was really into weightlifting. Probably the most buff doctor I've ever met in my life. And in his study basically was revealing that unless you are testing your body, your brain assumes that you're dying. And when you think of sort of like the primitive structure of the brain, that unless you're out there gathering your food, there's something wrong and your body's probably shutting down. So his advice was constant movement, constant exercise. It stimulates your brain. It keeps your brain strong. Your brain believes it's going to live. There's some very, very interesting studies on stress now. There's always sort of been some perception that stress is bad. But many, many studies are revealing that stress builds resiliency. And it's not the stress you experience that's the issue. It's the attitude in your mind. A study published in the Annals of Behavioral Medicine shows that it's not just the stress, but how you react to it that could have a health impact down the road. Specifically, researchers found that people who were more stressed out and anxious about the stress of everyday life were more likely to have chronic health conditions, such as heart problems or arthritis, 10 years later, compared with people who viewed things through a more relaxed lens. So it's not so much what you're doing as how you're holding it, what you believe about it. And that becomes a very interesting inquiry. So the balance of doing and non-doing, applying effort and learning how to not apply effort, is a very powerful skill through life, but we also bring it into meditation practice as well. There are innumerable disciplines that are all about training focused, sustained attention on one fixed point. Focusing on the breath, on sound, on vibration, using that anchor, come back, come back, come back. That's why the breath is very helpful in meditation, because you're giving the job of mind to do. You're giving... I'll just leave that as it is. Hope there's some mystical teaching in that I didn't realize I was offering. Lots of studies have shown that when you develop concentration, you become more effective, learning how to sustain attention on a fixed point. I remember at some point like toward the end of a month-long retreat I was doing, when it was one of those little things where I realized, oh, this is a training program. I'm training myself to stay. Quite powerful. And there are myriad traditions and beautiful teachings that are all about relaxing. They're all about letting go. The practices that say, don't touch life. Don't touch it. Just let it be. Can you just be the observer and just watch everything pass? In some ways, they're opposites. In some ways, they're powerfully joined. Your capacity to pay attention in a narrow way, and your capacity to pay attention in a holistic, global way. And that's why I find the practice of first you begin with focus, gather yourself here, and then open into flow, establish a sense of who you are as the observer, and then that inquiry into simply letting it be. I find that to be a very helpful sequence in my own practice. So another model that touches a little bit on this sense of finding balance in your life. There's a classic teaching story that comes from yoga. It's the story of this radiant teacher, just this beautiful woman teacher who would just sit and would emanate a radiance about her. And people would come from all over to sit with her because of this quality of presence that they could just feel kind of emanating from her. And someone asked her later, what's your secret? How do you cultivate such a sense of presence and radiance? And her answer was a little zen. She said, I eat when I'm hungry and I sleep when I'm tired. And what that points to is a very profound teaching that comes from yoga philosophy. That's the balance of two elements of prana and chitta. Prana is energy. And it's who you are as a being of energy. Your physical body, the emotions, the movement of thought. The other side of that is chitta, which is awareness, or the mind. So you are this alive being, this human body, and you are that which is aware of the body, your capacity to be aware. So we're always trying to find a balance in this play of energy and awareness of the body and the mind. There's so much to drop into in this because I find it to be so informative. But when we think of the universe made up of these two elements of energy and awareness, of form and space, it becomes very, very interesting as to how you live your life, looking for the sense of balance. When you come home from a hard day, or you've been really engaged, feeling kind of tight, and you get home, what will you want to do? It depends on your habits and so forth, but it might be to have a glass of wine, put on some music, take the dog for a walk, take a nap, go for a walk or a workout. You do something to help you shift from the mind back into your body, back into that sense of flow. And at some point you feel like, I'm back. I found a sense of balance. In that same way, there are times when it's almost like there's too much energy. Times when you're feeling really emotional. Or times when your mind is really overactive and you're obsessing on the same issue again and again without any resolution. Or you've got 1,000 ideas, but you can't start on one thing. There's too much prana, there's too much energy. And so what you'll need to do, and forgive the pun, it's a horrible pun, but you need to get your chit together. You want to engage the mind in a way where you can kind of sense the overview of what it is that you're aiming toward, or You invoke sort of that wisdom element. So we're constantly trying to balance this out. And the mind naturally overrides energy. Chitta controls prana most of the time. And the classic examples, because I can't think of any others, when you are working at your computer and the prana, the energy, will communicate to you saying, I need to pee. And the mind says, let me just finish this, we'll do it later. And later you're racing. Or you are, at the end of the day, getting a signal from your body that says, now would be the perfect time to lie down and go to bed. And the mind thinks, 5 minutes to the Daily Show. Just a little bit longer. It overrides the energy. Or you go out to a restaurant, you've been so looking forward to this restaurant, and at some point during the meal, there's a subtle signal from the prana, from the energy that says, you have just achieved optimal nutrition. And the mind is, we haven't even seen a dessert tray. Come on. So my teacher, Swami Kripalu, spoke of how, for the average person, chitta controls prana. The mind controls energy, except for one time, and that's when you fall asleep. When you fall asleep, your body restores and rebalances. You ever had that experience of being sure you're going to get a cold or a flu, and you take a hot shower or a warm bath, and you drink some tea, and you go to bed early, and you feel great in the morning? It's because the prana was free to sort of bring you back into balance and restore. For those who practice mindfulness being practicing non-judging awareness with the body as your anchor, and this can be through a discipline of yoga or martial arts or exercise, whatever it may be. But for those who engage into an embodied sense-based practice, you're changing that balance. You're actually listening, deeply listening to the prana. You're listening to the energy. You're tuning into the energy of here and now. And the mind, rather than controlling, becomes more of a witness. It becomes more of the observer. And then what happens is the prana, or the energy, is free to move. You begin to feel things you hadn't felt before because you were kind of controlling them in some way. You'll begin to notice emotions that were a little packed down a little bit deep. But now that you're relaxing and paying attention, they're kind of coming to the surface. You begin to see patterns of your reactivity and your habits and kind of sense the consequences of those. Because your capacity for self-observation without judgment, the witness, gets stronger. You're not holding on so tight. So you can see and feel more of what's between you and feeling free. So this practice of moving from awareness of a sensation to that which is aware can be extraordinarily powerful. To ask yourself, where is the balance in this moment? So this kind of leads to sort of what it is we're all wanting, ultimately, which is this quality of equanimity. Your capacity to feel a sense of presence and ease no matter what the external conditions. That's considered the real fruit of the practice. I saw this cartoon of a man and a woman on a date, in a restaurant. And she's saying, you only want happiness, Dave. I want wealth, power, fame, and happiness. But I think what we're really wanting is balance. So during this weekend, after the wedding and dancing with my nieces, we went back to our our hotel into the casino. And it was such a different world than the world I live in. Because usually when I'm not here, I'm either on vacation or on a retreat, people on retreats. So we were riding the elevator up, and this other couple got on the elevator, and this guy and his pregnant wife, and he was saying, "I can feel it, baby. I can feel it," And he looked at me and says, "Win some money and buy something for your wife. It's going to feel great." So you step out of the elevator, and then instantly the music is like boom, 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 boom. And they play this music it's a little bit faster than your pulse when you're excited, So you're instantly like, oh my God, there's something going on, And then this was like a Saturday night, in the casino, and then you walk in, and it's just this explosion of sensation. There's this food court that has every addictive food you can possibly imagine. And so we were just sort of like the country bumpkins walking around with our mouths open. So we were just looking at the food, and there was someone who had ordered, have a crepe made for you. So this crepe had fruit and then chocolate on top of the fruit, and then wrapped up, and then more chocolate on top of that. And then they handed it to her, and she had a jumbo thing of coffee. This was like 10:30 at night. So I said to Tara, I don't think she's going to bed right away. And just to see what a scene it was for any addiction you'd like to cultivate is all right there, between the food and this waiter came by with this huge tray with all these drinks, and I said to Tara, there's got to be a fifth of alcohol in that one tray, and you can smoke in public, so there was all of that, and so we just sort of walked around and sort of watched, and the thing that amazed me, this was like acres of just filled with sound and lights and things boinging and crashing and music, but what I noticed, absolutely no one was smiling. And so as we were walking through, I said to Tara, let's do metta. So if you're not familiar with metta, the metta practice is the practice of kindness. And Tara said, let's just look at the goodness of each person. And then she said, let's see if we can make eye contact and smile and get someone to smile back. So we were these two goofballs walking around this casino. It was amazing. And what amazed me was how few people smiled back. And I realized either you're staring into a slot machine, or you're at a poker or a blackjack table, and everyone's your enemy. So you're trying to read them and trying to mask your own face. But then even the people walking from one place to another just had a kind of an avoidant quality to them. But there were a few times, it was mostly the people who were running the tables, who are looking for people to attract to the table. But there was just one time this one woman looked up from her table, and she did a classic double take, it was like you actually see me, and then the smile back was just like this injection of compassion and connection. It was really, really quite wonderful. The thing that I really noticed in looking around at and trying to see the goodness in people's faces was really seeing the pain, just a huge amount of pain. And that's not true of everyone. There are definitely people there to party and have fun and saw it as entertainment. But the practice of offering goodwill to everyone, and it was also an incredibly diverse crowd, that was kind of cool, it really helped me to suspend judgment. And I really saw that everyone there for that night was looking for balance. They're either looking to get away from their worries, and they're looking to have an experience with friends. They were there to be happy. And for some, the stimulation, was their refuge from their own inner experience. So here's what Stephen Batchelor, a wonderful teacher, says of equanimity, the sense of inner balance. He says, equanimity sees others as they are. No one is essentially desirable, no one is essentially repugnant, and no one is essentially insignificant. All are sentient beings, hoping and fearing, loving and hating, living and dying. So we all look for balance. And one way we look for balance is to our externals, to change the externals, change where we live, change who we work for, and that can be quite skillful. The other alternative is to change the internals, to look closely at how you're holding your experience, and to notice if you're holding it with some aversion, some form of pushing away, or judgment, or blame, or anger, or if you're holding your experience with some form of clinging, of attachment, and inability to let go. So noticing a supportive environment can be very, very helpful. But it's also about examining your internal world. So it's all about your capacity to be happy, no matter what the externals. So I got home from the casino, and as I was unpacking, I realized that I had left both of my hard drives with over 50,000 photos and videos in the hotel room. And I called and I couldn't get through. I called 10 times. And I knew I was writing this talk, so I really tried to practice equanimity. It's really hard. I'm attached. Hopefully they're coming tomorrow. I did get through. But I really had to ask myself, so what if, my lifetime of photography, at least 2/3 I have backed up, but everything in the last year and a half was just gone. Could I really hold that lightly? I think I'll find out tomorrow. So here's a little bit on equanimity. We've spoken about sort of recognizing the middle way of noticing when you're too tight and when you need to soften and let go. Notice when you're too loose and when you need to re-engage. Finding that perfect place in between. And that it's about noticing your effort, the effort that you bring into your life, the effort that you bring into any given moment. Is it more skillful to do? Is it more skillful to be? Finding that inner place. It's about finding the balance and the awareness of the energy and the awareness and balancing that out as well. And then this ultimate inquiry of what does it mean to be balanced no matter what? And we're going to close with a meditation on that. So one translation for the word equanimity in Pali, the language of the Buddha, it's upekkha. And it sort of refers to the power of observation. To be able to see without getting caught by what you see. And when that's well developed, it can lead to very, very deep tranquility. It's about being able to see the big picture. When you take the 3,000-year view, the details sort of change focus a little bit. Here's what one bhikkhu says in describing this. He said, "It is an evenness of mind, unshakable freedom of mind, a state, an inner state that cannot be upset by gain and loss, by honor and dishonor, by praise and blame, and by pleasure and pain. It's freedom from all points of self-reference." So let's explore this in a meditation, and we'll take this into concluding our evening together. So if you like, you can close your eyes. Let your attention just gently come into your experience of the here and now. You might do this by just turning your attention to the feeling of the breath. You might open your awareness to the sounds around you. And to this feeling tone of your body. There are many, many different instructions in meditation. From those that tell you to pay close attention, to give all of your effort to one pointed awareness, to those teachings that speak more of being the observer, being the non-judging witness of your experience. And to those instructions that articulate this quality of just resting in being, resting in presence. Ultimately, my feeling is this is a pathless path. What you have is a very powerful question. How does this moment want you to be with it? What brings you into balance? To be one-pointed and focused? To be aware of flow? Or to simply allow and let be? We'll take the next few minutes in silence together. Two questions can be most helpful. What is your experience right now? Can you let this be? This awareness of equanimity, to be free of attachment and anger, can open you to the limitless qualities of awareness. And it can be interesting to find the balance, to reflect on the limitless qualities of kindness and compassion You might bring into mind someone in your life right now, someone to whom you find your attention easily flowing, or maybe someone who may be in need. Just reflecting on the following phrases. May you feel happy, and just as I wish to feel happy. May you feel safe from inner harm, as I wish to feel safe. May you feel safe from external harm, as I wish to feel safe. May you feel inner peace, as I wish to feel peace. May you feel free from suffering, as I wish to feel free. In these final minutes, if you wish, in your own way, make this offering to those who spontaneously arise. And we'll close by offering this to yourself. May your capacity for happiness deepen and widen. May your capacity for freedom deepen and widen. You might gently lengthen the breath. And when you're ready, you can let your eyes open. So thank you for your kind attention. May you find balance, and you may find after sitting the perfect balance for you will be having a cookie to give you enough energy to get back out to your car. So that's available for you. A few quick announcements before